Hi everyone, welcome to today's video. Today we're talking about Trench Crusades. We'll be talking about what the game is, where to get the models, how to print them, and how to paint one up. So let's get into it.
For those of you not aware of what Trench Crusades is, it is a miniature agnostic, free rules war game, kind of set with a grimdark, kind of alternate Earth history where basically the Templars, in their greed, opened up essentially a gateway to hell, and then now throughout the years, there's a timeline here. Basically, during the Crusades, they opened this gate to hell, and then there has been an ongoing war between the forces of hell and the forces of mankind ever since that time. So it's kind of got a World War One aesthetic with grimdark and kind of hellish features. So again, with trenches in play. Again, the rules are free online, so they've got all the playtest rules here. They do have miniatures available as well, which we'll look at in a second. They have, I believe, miniatures still coming that are physical miniatures you can buy, but everything is available right now on digital files as well. So if you want to, download their files, you can pay for those on My Mini Factory, and then, or if you just want to use alternate miniatures, they specify base sizes in here, as well as all the playtest rules. So you can essentially get playing this game if you have existing miniatures, even if you don't want to download or pay for their miniatures. So if you just want to get the feel of the game, you can do that. But today we're going to talk about downloading a miniature, printing it, and painting it. All right, so let's get into the miniatures. All right, so Trench Crusades have all their models up on My Mini Factory. So they've got bundles of different units that you can buy, and they also have individual units as well. So I ended up going with just a single unit to start. They've got a lot of cool models, but I wanted to print one first and just see how I like their setup. I ended up going with, let me find the model here. I ended up going with, here we are, the Death Commando. So I purchased the model from the site and then got it downloaded. And the one thing that's odd here is they show a base, but these files don't come with a base, which is kind of surprising to me. It doesn't call out the base size, so I did go to their website and find out this is on a 32 millimeter base. Again, I don't know why they don't include bases with these. It just seems like that's a pretty easy thing to do. However, I did make bases for all these sizes. I've got these uploaded to my cults. They're free off of there. I will link those in the description. So this should cover all the different Trench Crusade base options that you want. I made them basically solid in case you want to print it this way, and then basically a open or hollow base, and they are oriented upside down, so you'll print the base first, so you don't need any supports. Again, I'll link that in the description here. So I printed the base on FDM, and then I went to get the Death Commando set up on my Mars 4. All right, if you're unfamiliar with setting up a 3D print, so I use Chitubox for my resin printer. This is a free software you can download from online. I set my printer to my Elegoo Mars 4. And then once you download your file from My Mini Factory, what you're going to do is unzip the file. And for Trench Crusades, they come with unsupported, some images, and then also supported. Again, if you're new, I recommend supported. And even if you've been printing for a while, honestly, it's often easy just to use supported files as long as it's from a creator that you trust to have good support models. From what I've seen, Trench Crusades has done a really good job making their support models. So I'm going to select this file, open it up, and then it's going to pop onto my print bed here. And you can move this around as needed. You can copy it, create multiple versions of it. So I don't want 4 copies. Let's just do 1. So that way now I've got 2 models I can work with. Now that I've got your models set up, you're going to go into your slice settings. Now, one thing, if you're using a common resin, again, I use a Soraya Tech Fast, which is down here. So most of these manufacturers will have specific profiles that you can download from their website for your specific printer. So in this case, I went to Soraya Tech. I downloaded all their profiles for the Mars 4. So you can see they've got a whole variety of different colors and materials here. So again, I'm going to select the Fast. I've got a Fast Gray that I'm using. I'm going to apply those settings. And then now that will be applied to all the models in my print. Again, I've had really good luck using these preset settings. They've worked really well for me, even using some of the clears or clear greens. I've just had again, a lot of success with them. So I recommend that, again, if you're starting out or even if you're experienced, this just makes things a little bit easier. Now, once you do this, you're going to want to slice. This will generate your slice preview. And then there's one major thing you're going to want to do. Once you've sliced, you can scroll down here and see how your print is. For small models like this, I print solid. I don't print hollow. One thing, if you're printing hollow, you're going to have to make sure that you have a hole for resin to drain out of. So for small models, I just print solid. So that way the models are cured all throughout. I don't have to worry about liquid resin. So again, if you're new, just do solid models. Don't worry about hollowing out or making holes. So the key thing to do is hit detect islands. And what that's going to do is it's going to look for any small pieces not attached, basically any pixels not attached to either the supports or the main model. And the reason you want to hit detect islands is if you have pieces that aren't connected to the model, essentially as your bed moves in and out of the vat, those pieces will stay on your FEP. So they won't be attached to the print plate. They will just be loose and not attached to anything at all. Will either break free and float around your print vat, or they will stick to the FEP and then obscure future pixels that would be in those spots. So again, when you're 3D printing, always key to hit detect islands and then delete all islands. Once that's complete, you're going to want to hit save. For mine, I'll be hitting save and then save it to a USB drive. That's how I plug it into my Mars 4. And then once that's saved, we can just plug it in our 3D printer and get printing. So this is the base that I printed on my FDM printer. And I've got some little bits of cork that I'm going to super glue to the base. This will be kind of rocks or terrain that my Mini will stand on. So basically I just took the cork, broke it up into some little pieces, used my knife to kind of cut a little bit flatter in sections. And then right now I'm just arranging it to make sure it has enough surface area for my model to sit on. So just glue these in place real quick and then double check to make sure the model fits on there before everything's secured. I need to adjust that a little bit, so we're going to push that one piece back and then glue it in place. This is just the first step. I'm going to be adding some more bits as we go. And I'm just using regular super glue here, nothing special. No accelerant, just regular glue. It dries pretty quick with the cork, that absorbs it pretty quick. So just slide it into place. Again, want to double check the model, and then we will go on from there. All right, good to go. Now for the next step, I did print some tiny skulls. I will link these in the description, but they were free off of Thingiverse. I actually printed these on FDM. It was just a little bit easier. I had a 0.2 nozzle set up on one of my printers. So I just printed them off in a matte gray, and then I just super glued them to the base. Again, trying to go for kind of a grimdark aesthetic here, so going to do kind of a pile of skulls in the back and then a few other skulls just floating around here. So I'm just super gluing these. They are very tiny and kind of finicky. I know Citadel sells a box of skulls, but again, I just wanted something easy, so just printed them and got them all set up here. Actually, I printed, I think, 20 skulls. I did not end up needing near that many. But again, they're hard to use. I should use some super glue with accelerant, but this was just a regular super glue that I used on here. So let's just get these affixed on here and we'll move on to the next phase. All right, in this step, I'm just using some watered down PVA glue or Elmer's glue. I'm just going to use this as a base for some sand. This is just cheap. I bought a bag of sand a few years ago, filled it out some smaller pieces, and this is just kind of filling in the gaps between the rocks. And again, I'm just touching up certain spots where the sand didn't fill in and just trying to make sure I've got good coverage across the entire base. Once that's done, we're going to let it dry and move on. Time to get the miniature secured to the base. Again, let that dry. I'm going to move on to painting. So I did base coat the whole thing in a matte black, and then I'm moving on to a heritage brick for the base. I kind of wanted a reddish base theme to this. So all the rock and sand bits are getting covered in this, and this is just a acrylic paint. Just covering it. I did not water it down at all. It's relatively thin already, so just trying to hit all the rocks, and then trying to avoid the skulls as well. We will cover those a little bit later. And then now that that has dried, I'm going to put a wash across all the heritage brick that I did, and then we're going to move on to a dry brushing phase. I did some dried clay, again another acrylic paint, just hitting the highlights on this, just trying to make sure some of those rocks pop and add a little bit of depth to this. Next up are the skulls, so I start off with a white scar, trying to hit all the skulls and avoid the rest of the train that I painted. So I hit the pile of skulls, and then as well as the individual skulls that are placed around it. Trying to make sure everything's covered, so that way once we come in with a contrast paint later, that'll go smoothly over the rest of the skulls. I did go back to the train for a little bit with some light buttermilk. Again, just trying to highlight some of the edges here, just to make some of those rocks stand out a little bit more. I felt they're fading into the darkness underneath the model a little bit. So just picking out some of those rocks to make sure they pop a little bit better. Moving on back to the skulls, I used a skeleton horde contrast paint and just putting this wash all over the skulls. It's a little bit of a yellowish, but I feel like it's not too yellowy, just to give a nice kind of aged bone look. So make sure you work that in all the crevices and get good coverage on the skulls. Then I went back in with the flayed one flesh to highlight the tops of the skulls and around some of the eye sockets there, just to make sure that the tops are a little bit lighter. For the flesh on this model, I went with a Demonetta hide. Again, there's not a lot of flesh on this. There's some around the neck and the hands, and then you'll see I'll miss some on the legs that I'll have to touch up later, but trying to cover all the bits with this to start as a base on this. It's kind of a dark purplish, but not overly purple. It's almost like a grayish purple, so kind of good for something otherworldly. Once all the flesh bits are done, we will move on to the armor. I start off with a death metal from Army Painter. It's a little bit of a kind of almost like a bronzy dark. I've wanted to use this paint for a while, and I thought this model would be a good grimdark aesthetic for it. So I covered most of the armor plates with this. There's going to be a few that I'm going to hit up with a lead belcher later, but this is covering the bulk of the armor, which is really the bulk of the piece, is this dark copperish metallic here. So just make sure you cover all the armor bits and work across all the features. This paint covers pretty well, so just working all the crevices and make sure I don't miss any parts. I also apologize for some of the strobe effect on this. I did try some new lighting, and at certain points you can kind of see the lining across of this. So this didn't show up at regular speed, but unfortunately at high speed painting you can see the lights. So again, apologize for that. So once I've got all the bits covered with the death metal, I did go back and find some spots that I missed with the Demonetta hide. So the hands, just want to make sure I got those covered, as well as some of the legs that I had missed. Moving on to the rest of the armor, I used a lead belcher. This is a good silver base, so we're going to cover all of the chainmail area with this, both front and back, as well as some of the other plugs I felt that were metallic-y. The nice thing about the resin prints is all the details showing up that nice chainmail. So it was nice to work all the lead belcher into there and make sure that it didn't overfill any parts. It was pretty thin, so it worked in pretty well to the spots. Next up, I'm going to shade the flesh with the Drukhari Violet. And again, not a lot of flesh on this, but really want to work on those neck folds where a lot of those details at, and then also the little bits on the legs, arms, and hands. Just putting a light wash, trying to make sure it doesn't pool too much, because again, there's not a lot of flesh, so if you've got too much shading on your brush, it'll pool in certain spots, and we don't want that. So just doing a very light wash on this model. Next up is everyone's favorite, Nuln Oil, and this will be applied all over the armor bits, both the lead belcher and the death metal. Working this into the crevices just to make sure we get some contrast between the different sections of the metal, and really kind of make the dark bits a little bit grimier, and then make the raised bits pop a little bit better. Next up, I did mix some of this craft paint to try to highlight some of the darker metallic areas. I don't have a great highlight for the death metal, so this is kind of the best option I had as a kind of intermediate highlight. I think it worked out okay hitting some of the bits. It's not a perfect solution, but I do think it accented some of the colors pretty well. Next up, I used a shining silver on the metallic bits. I just dry brushed that on, trying to hit some of the high spots of the chainmail and then the upper pistons in his back. Next up was a Skull Crusher brass. I think this was actually probably a little bit too light of a metallic color. Hitting some of the bolts and other highlights. Unfortunately, I didn't have a good intermediate color, but it was something I want to hit the edges and make those pop a little bit better. So it may have been a little bit overboard, but hey, as long as there's paint on the model, it's looking good. So I think some of the highlights worked out. Just may have been a little bit overdone in some sections. But overall, I'm still happy with how this model's looking. We're going to go back and add some rust effect to this. I use that same heritage brick I used on the base and just trying to add a little bit of rusty bits to this. Next up is some Genestealer purple, and this is going to hit the highlights on the flesh. So again, not very many spots, but just hitting the hands and the legs, and especially trying to touch some of those spots on the neck where those raised highlights really pop. Then I did some flayed one's flesh on his claws, which are just really on his feet, and then also his teeth. And then came in with contrast yellow on this to just kind of give him a grimy yellow feel. Next up, or on the base, I have some Army Painter Mountain Tufts. I just use some PVA glue to help secure these in place. They do have a little bit of adhesive on the bottom, but I feel like a little PVA helps secure them in spot. All right, the last thing we need to do is paint up the wires. I did some Evil Sun Scarlet, just covering the wires entirely from just the arms up to the shoulder. Then next is a Wild Rider Red, and this is just highlights on top of the wires. And that does it for today's video. Please like and subscribe for more. Thanks, everyone.